These organisms are all invasive species. These species disrupt the food web and create nutrient limitation to other species. The sea lamprey lives in the photic zone where the light reaches the body of water and organisms are able to grow. However, the zebra mussels live in the benthic zone, which is the very lowest part of a body of water. They have a parasitic relationship with clams because the clams do not benefit from the relationship.
Depicted here is a worm, which is a tetraphore and feeds on detritus, which is waste. It lives under logs, which is a light-limited environment, and the worm's trophic level is a decomposer. Now it contributes to the carbon cycle by breaking down the organic matter around it, putting the carbon back into the soil. The soil that it lives in is an abiotic factor that contains the carbon for future plants to utilize while they grow.
The salamander has cryptic coloration that blends it in with its environment. Living under logs is a learned behavior because that's where they find food and hide from predators. Although the salamander species has great diversity, their population is declining.
This picture shows how human population growth ended up leading to the logging of an area, and that logging ended up destroying a keystone species, being the trees. The trees were habitats for the squirrels and birds and other species, and with them gone, those same species had to emigrate out of the area. Once the emigration occurs, new species will start to come into the area. At first, they'll exponentially grow because there won't be almost any competition. And then our selection will start to take place as the small primary producer populations start to come in, like grass and things like that. And that will slowly start to shift over time into K selection, as like a bigger, low population species will start to come in, like trees or bears or things like that. This is all an example of secondary succession because this new community came in after an old community ended up leaving.
The hawk is a tertiary consumer, meaning it's at the top of the pyramid of biomass. The top of the pyramid of biomass means that this creature gets the least amount of energy because the energy coming up the pyramid is lost through heat energy and use of the other animals. The hawk is a predator. That's also why it's a tertiary consumer. It feeds on other living organisms, such as mice, rabbits, etc. The hawk in this picture is seen going towards its nest, which it can find by spatial learning, meaning it can point out one object and find its nest from that one object.
This is a picture of a terrestrial biome. A terrestrial biome is basically just a land ecosystem, and the picture is specifically a forest biome. Forest biomes tend to be species-rich, meaning they just have a lot of species within them. They also tend to be very dense, meaning that they contain a lot of organisms and species in a certain amount of area. Many species are affected by the density of an area, meaning that they are density dependent. For example, grass is density dependent because it is affected by the trees of an area. So like it can't grow in a forest because the trees will block out the sun and there won't be any sun to get to the grass. That also means that trees are a biotic factor because they affect what can grow around them by blocking the sun and having large root systems. This picture is also an example of patchiness, and that can be seen with how like the grasslands are separated from the forests, but there can be like a tree inside the grassland still, and it's just patchiness is just the random allocation of organisms and species in an area, and that can occur through dispersion, which is just how the random way offspring is dispersed from like an organism. Like a tree will like set out a pine cone, and the pine cone can blow and, go wherever and end up making a tree somewhere else. And that can lead to the random patchiness that there is.
This photo is an example of an ecosystem that has logistic growth of shrubs because it has a carrying capacity. A carrying capacity is a limit of growth. These shrubs are part of a community where they live off of biomass, which is organic material.
The piping plover, as seen here, is a migratory bird, meaning it follows warm weather. Into winter, it goes to the Gulf of Mexico, and in the summer, it comes back to the Sleeping Bear Dunes. The piping plovers are also very territorial birds. They fight off predators that get close to their nests. The male competition for mates and the female mate choices are also a very aggressive process, and it's very specific also. Here you see the piping plover's eggs. The young piping plovers go through a process called imprinting. This is when they learn behavioral characteristics that help them with survival in the future from their parents. Along with imprinting, the young piping plovers have instinctive, genetic, behavioral traits. This is through fixed action patterns that they have.
This picture of Lake Michigan is an example of an aquatic biome. The species richness is high due to the various types of organisms in the lake. Asian carp, a species that immigrated to the Great Lakes, have a high population. The layers of a body of water is categorized by how much light is available at a certain depth. As mentioned earlier, the top layer of the water is the photic zone, where there is a lot of light allowing for vegetation to grow. The second layer, where there is no light, called the aphotic zone. And finally, the third layer is the benthic zone, the floor of the body of water.
Ethology is the study of animalistic behaviors, and the squirrel is a more advanced creature, so it'll use a cognitive map versus spatial learning, which means that it'll use many landmarks in the area to locate its nest versus just one. The squirrel is a herbivore. It feeds off of plants and nuts, and through habituation, once the squirrel comes in contact with humans over a long period of time, it will lose the flight response that it has and will become more comfortable around human beings. Now, the babies in the squirrel's nest, they have a sensitive period, and that is when they will be absorbing most of the information and learning from their mother the most.